The story of the Thousand Islands begins long before humans first arrived and reaches now to a bustling region with an eye to the future. TVO.org's Michael Lehan ventured on the road for more. Have a look.
I'm traveling along the Thousand Islands Parkway. It's a scenic bypass route between Brockville and Gananoque in Ontario. Built in the 1930s, the 39-kilometer stretch was originally part of Highway 2, the freeway that connected Toronto to Montreal. Local opposition in the 1950s successfully lobbied to have the Highway 401 bypass built farther inland, protecting the scenic route. Today, the Thousand Islands are a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, where this unique geological and historical point is preserved as a natural wonder and tourist destination. It's a place where tectonic plates meet, where nature meets, where nations meet, where people meet. Like the salty admirals and great battleships of their namesakes, the Thousand Islands ply the waters of the St. Lawrence River, patrolling a border point in remembrance of a time when the shores were in conflict 2 centuries ago. But the Thousand Islands have a much deeper history. To discover this history, I stopped at the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network office just outside the town of Ivy Lee. I spoke with Don Ross, Vice Chair of the Reserve.
Well, the story of the Thousand Islands actually begins about 1.5 billion years ago. There was a set of mountain ranges that grew in this region as continents collided. As grandiose as the Himalayas or the Rockies of today, mountains wear down to the point where all that's left are the roots of those ancient mountains. The Frontenac Arch is an arm that connects the Adirondack Mountains to the south of us to the Canadian Shield to the north. Lake Ontario originally flowed southward out the river at Oswego and down into the Hudson Valley and off to the Atlantic coast. But as the land rose after the last ice age, they still had to escape somewhere, and they began to flow out across the top of the Frontenac Arch, and so that the 1,000 hilltops became 1,000 islands.
The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization declared the Frontenac Arch a World Biosphere Reserve in 2002.
The reason that it's a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve is because of the ecological diversity. 1/3 of the species at risk in the whole province are found just within in the Biosphere Reserve. The Frontenac Arch and the St. Lawrence River Valley converging here put us at that crossroads of the continent in a sense. For migrations of plant and animals. And they're kept here today, often in small remnant populations. This has been an area that has been traded upon, traveled across, settled by, warred over by all sorts of cultures. These migration routes for plants and animals were also migration routes and trade routes for people, and it brought a lot of different cultures into contact. Stone and chert and whalebone tools from the Atlantic coastal region, Caribbean seashells, copper tools and knives from the Yellowknife, pottery types and stone implements and so forth that had their origins far to the west of here. The ice ages, as you say, have only been off this part of the landscape for 10 to 15,000 years. There's a campsite in the region that was discovered that goes back over 9,000 years. One of the first to see and name the area was good old Samuel de Champlain. The story goes as he stood on the north shore there and said, "What's all that I see in the distance?" Many, many islands, and so he called it Les Mille Îles, the Thousand Islands. After the American War of Independence, and people that were loyal to the British cause were called loyalists and driven out, we had a big influx of people from eastern seaboard states, in particular Vermont and New Hampshire.
Buried in this family cemetery is the founder of LaRue Mills, William LaRue, his wife Abigail, and 6 of their 9 children. LaRue was a United Empire Loyalist settler, born in Albany, New York in 1760. He came to this area in 1790 and established a sawmill and grist mill on the creek nearby.
If you travel around the landscape, there's still a lot of small mills and mill sites that are there. They were the industrial hubs of a lot of the communities. Well, they could pretty well be self-contained and supply soup to nuts in a very broad sense to the community and the surrounding region. And that story kind of repeats itself in many, many places around the landscape.
The Thousand Islands earned their fame during the Gilded Age, when American elites and cultural icons in the late 19th and early 20th century discovered its natural beauty as a place to escape city life. At the western end of the Thousand Islands Parkway is the historic town of Gananoque. Like much of southern Ontario, it's faced the challenge of a declining manufacturing sector, but it's also seen a boom in tourism. As the self-styled gateway to the Thousand Islands, the town is filled with thriving small tourism businesses, inns, boat tours, and since 2011, the Gananoque Brewing Company. It's one of over 300 small breweries that have opened in Ontario over the past decade. Bruce Davis is Gananoque Brewing Company's founder and president.
We started the brewery really before the big wave of craft brewers, right? So now there are hundreds of breweries in Ontario. We came into this about 4 years ago, started to brew beer, and opened this brewery up about a year and a half ago. So I think our timing was perfect. And you know, the public is much more accepting of craft beer. And as part of a tourist thing too, people have made it now part of their travel plans. So when people travel, they start to look for craft breweries. So I think our timing was perfect. We've changed the way that beer is consumed in Gananoque. This Eastern Ontario town used to be very, very much, you know, a big beer kind of town, but locals are really accepting of craft beer. But more than that, I'd say a lot of international visitors, a lot of Quebecers come here, or people traveling between Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa, people who are just looking for a bit of a break, so they want to stop. We're really proud of our terroir program. So a number of our beers, we actually use local ingredients. One of the local farmers is on our board of directors. And in fact, this week we were making a beer with local apples and local wheat. We've used local rye, we've used local oats. We have in the past used local hops. We have 2 local hop yards. I think the grain is something that we really do that's different. Getting a local farmer to grow local grain, and then he mills it, and then he brings it to us. That's pretty cool. Across Eastern Ontario, I'm noticing a lot of the breweries are very, very close to farmers. It's a big thing that we do here. So it's not just the Gananoque Brewing Company. Other breweries in Eastern Ontario have that connection, that linkage to local crops that you don't see with some of the downtown breweries. It's harder for them to build relationships with farmers, but I think for us in this part of the province, you know, we don't work in isolation. We have to work with local restaurants. They sell our beer. You know, we want to cross-promote wherever possible. If we're going to do a trade show in Ottawa, or if we're going to do a trade show in Toronto, the town will, our economic development office will bring us along as part of the team. We want to be part of that. So we really see the brewery as being a catalyst to really help drive growth and renewal. It's an important part of our business.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.